Welcome to Module 12, Day 12 of how to buy your first rental property in 2026 in Cleveland, or 2027 by the way. It's a whole era. I figure this should work for this time frame. So how to make a smart offer today. That's what we're going to talk about. So you have to think of this two ways, and it has to do with your strategy. We've talked about this already, but you're either looking at like a turnkey, ready to go property or a distressed BRRRR deal. Buy right, renovate right, refinance right. And there could be some in between too. So consider that. But I'm focusing on these two specific targets that people might be looking for. So for a turnkey offer, and by turnkey, not necessarily, a lot of times turnkey, you're looking at something that's, a lot of times turnkey means there's already a tenant in it. I don't necessarily recommend that, but in certain instances that might make sense. But when I say turnkey, I'm talking about detail ready. In other words, this is going to go on the market and it has a wide appeal. It's ready to go completely. So if you are going to go on the MLS, find a property, it's all ready to go, and it would be really something that you'd be competing against with people that might want to live in the house, you probably will be forced to make an offer that is close to full value. You want to look at the overall investment, and you want to factor in like benefits you get for taxes and things like that too, by the way, in the investment, and identify cash flow, levels of cash flow, if that meets your investment criteria or not. And we talked about the investment calculator, which you can still text Investalize, INVESTALIZE. Text that phone number if you got text of this video. Email that, just that word in to our BDM, and we'll get you that calculator. But essentially, generally, especially at this point in time, if the house is ready to go and is priced within a certain range, it's going to sell pretty quickly, right? And if that's the case, there's not a lot of motivation on the owner to take a crazy lowball offer. If they've mispriced it, maybe so, right? And generally, if I've already evaluated a property, I like to throw out an offer anyways, but just don't think you're going to get it, right? So throw out an offer that would make you want that property. Because if you're working with an experienced agent, like with the modern day e-signing software within real estate, you can literally punch in the MLS number, the property pulls up, you enter the amount in and a couple other things that you've been working on. Everything's already added in. Press the button, you click a couple times to sign it, and then that agent sends it and forwards it. It's a very minimal amount of work. So if you've already done the work to look at it and it hasn't sold yet and it's a little high, you probably won't get it, but it's worth 5 minutes just to make an offer. Maybe you can start something and make a deal out of that, right? I always say, why not make the offer? So that's for retail and turnkey properties. And generally, when you're talking retail, usually it has the nicer furnishings, right? But don't offer retail if it doesn't, right? So if it has old stuff and they're still trying to get full value, and I see that all the time. People just don't even, if you haven't walked through the property, you don't get the feel sometimes. So if you're out of town, a lot of people, probably most of the people that will watch this video, they're not in-town buyers. They're out of town. So they're relying on the MLS photos as well as hopefully the agent they're using walking through and getting them a little walkthrough, some pictures and videos. So you're not always going to see the full effect. Like you have to have someone that you trust say, hey, this is not, you need to look over here. But usually with like real photos that weren't like AI modified from your own rep, if you look at them, you'll be able to see like, here's some warning signs, right? I'll do it, but this is really not worthy of that higher price. This higher price probably is that they're trying to get is really more for a house that's a slightly higher cosmetic or aesthetic grade, like granite countertops and things like that. Now, in ceramic tile backsplashes and nicer flooring and nicer fixtures, right? So definitely look at those. If you're going to be paying that high price, make sure you're actually getting that house and you're not just buying into something because you're excited to do a deal, right? On the other hand, if you're looking at distressed BRRRR deals, distressed / BRRRR type house deals, right? And sometimes at the moment, we're not seeing a ton of these on the MLS. And so you have to cast your net far and wide. There's some big lists of like wholesaler type lists that connect you with wholesalers. And by the way, I've already talked about this. I don't love dealing with wholesalers. They're normally a pain in the butt. They're not regulated like they should be, but oftentimes they are controlling the only available crap houses unless you're just driving the streets yourself and out there, which if you don't live in town, you probably can't do anyways, right? So there are agents that will pay attention and try to get their buyers in. But again, everything changes. You have to have a very aggressive attitude in terms of being willing to take risks, quickly assess damage and either make an offer or put a deposit down on what it's being offered for and know very quickly, hey, is this in my range or not? So you have to have a clear idea of your investment strategy. How much profit do you have to make? Invest it in flips, they always call it maximal, they call it MAO, maximal allowable offer. Basically, you look at what will the retail amount be that I can sell this afterwards. And then you back off 20 to 30% or whatever you need to have profit, minimum profit. You back off an extra margin, you back off repairs, and then that's your maximal allowable offer, right? And then you offer a little lower that and you go up to your maximal allowable offer, right? So for you to have that, even if you're not flipping, it's still the idea. What will this refinance for? If I'm doing a BRRRR, back off 20%, because normally that's off that value. So if it'll refinance for, the value later will be $100,000 after fixed up appraised value. It's gonna be $100,000. You have to know that you have to be all in, including all expenses, if you want to get your money back out for like 80,000 or 80% of that after repaired financial value. Then you take the repairs off, then you take a margin, then you take the other expenses off, and that's the maximal allowable offer. And you would offer a little bit lower because you might have to go up, right? So that's the way that you would need to work that, making that offer on more of a distressed sale. And you have to know those numbers up front. So you have to be able to quickly figure that out, make a rough guess on what the repairs are going to be, and then have that all calculated in your mind. Start to get an idea of certain areas where the values are, how to quickly establish those, and go for that. And recognizing that you can't do the same due diligence, but you're going to get some probably right and some wrong. You'll be a little off on some of these, but hopefully it averages out, right? That's what risk taking is, right? So and that means if you're taking a risk, you have to have a little bit extra as well, margin there, if that makes sense. So that's my advice on making offers. What I would say is, if you're making offers on the MLS, and I've mentioned this before, you should have a follow-up system. Now, depending on where you're offering, what you're doing. If you're, say, like a house is overpriced and you're making an offer that you think makes sense, if you have a follow-up system, sometimes when that pricing becomes reasonable, you can get that deal. And sometimes the price now drops lower than you offered before. So follow-up is everything. In any business, follow-up, there's always areas of business that require follow-up. And this is an example when you're creating a business of rental properties and purchasing houses as a professional. Follow-up is a big deal. And so you want to be working with your agent or directly, if you're going direct, making sure that you have a list and you're following up on all the potential things until they either come off the market or you come off the market because you've bought something and you're not ready. But until then, keep that list, because it is the follow-up that brings success oftentimes. And if not follow-up, then normally being really aggressive when you do things. So follow up hard when you make that offer. Try to get feedback. Call, have your agent call multiple times. Make sure that they're really aggressive about saying, what do we got to do? Show that you want this, right? And that is it. So I look forward to seeing you tomorrow for module 13, A13. It's going to be about a post deal in terms of inspection and negotiating before closing and whether to walk away or not. So I look forward to see you tomorrow. And as usual, if you have any interest in property management, be sure to contact our BDM. There's a link that you can schedule a meeting. We would love to talk to you. Have a great day and see you tomorrow.